Welcome to The Lounge, where I, Aminah Hughes, talk to people in the music, film, and other creative industries about the essence of their craft. Good morning, good evening, good night to you, wherever you are, and welcome to The Lounge. Now, before we start today, we're running a competition during this episode with a script pipeline giveaway, and I'll announce the details soon, so stay tuned. I'm joined today by screenwriter and script reader David Wappel. Originally from North Carolina, David worked in post-production in Atlanta, Georgia, before pivoting to writing and moving to Los Angeles. His original work often includes themes of private courage, reluctant leadership, and a problematic longing for childhood. You can see his work on HBO Max, in the film Long Gone By, and on Amazon Prime in the documentary Quest of the Muscle Nerd. David also works as a reader for various management and production companies, as well as one-on-one with writers. We're not talking about screenwriting, he's probably talking about Middle-earth, Shakespeare, or sailing. David Wappel, welcome to The Lounge.
Hi, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. How are you doing there?
Doing well, doing well.
That's good. I have to ask you about these swords that you've got on the wall. They look fantastic. Is one of them a replica Excalibur by any chance?
None of those. Those are Lord of the Rings swords. In high school, I'm still really into Lord of the Rings, but in high school I kind of went a little crazy, and so I have replicas of Gandalf's sword, Frodo's sword Sting, and Theoden's sword as well.
Wow. But you do have an Excalibur, right?
I do. I have it over here. I can't reach it right now, but yeah, I do have an Excalibur one as well.
Awesome. I have a bit of an Excalibur story. About 20 years ago, I was sparring with some friends, and with those fake swords that are wrapped in lots of fiberglass and lots of gaffer tape and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
for some reason, I thought it would be fun to pick up a replica Excalibur and start playing with that, and accidentally cut my friend's finger open. So, sorry, Sam. Anyway, he's fine now. It grew back. So I just want to ask you a bit about your personal journey into storytelling and what inspired it. Was it a journey that started for you as a kid?
Yeah, I think so. Maybe not consciously as a kid, but I think I was always interested in storytelling. Where I grew up, there's a lot of woods, and so my friends and I would go play in the woods, and you make stuff up like you always do as kids. And I realized, looking back on it, I realized I was usually the one driving that narrative. Sort of doing a little more invention than some of the others. And I think I was always interested in stories in that way, even before I really professionally started getting into it, or even had an inkling that I wanted to do anything in storytelling.
Were you into role playing as a kid, into D&D or anything like that?
No, not really. No, I actually played my first D&D game like about a year ago, and so I think it's just pretending, really, as a kid. Didn't really think about it too much as far as role playing. I was always myself, I guess, realizing, and so were my friends. We were always ourselves when we were kind of playing around. But um, yeah, I'm not sure actually when I started thinking about maybe I want to be a storyteller. I know I loved movies and I wanted to work in the movies, but I didn't understand. I think in high school, I didn't really, I knew I wanted to work in movies, but I wasn't thinking, well, I want to tell stories. That kind of came much later, actually. Um,
Mm.
and, but I did know that I wanted to work in the movies. I actually thought I wanted to be a cinematographer. And that's what I went to school for. I went to school and I studied philosophy and film studies. And my film studies, uh, my focus was on production and cinematography. But I ended up doing post-production in Atlanta, and now here I am doing screenwriting in LA. So I guess I've kind of gone through all of it to end up at screenwriting in a way.
So what was it that drove you towards screenwriting and reading as a profession, and what is it that you love about that?
I think it was really the ability to kind of get in there first on the creative level. I When I was working in post production, it sometimes felt like well, I have all this stuff in front of me, and I can only kind of tell as much as what I have to play with. And I always wanted more, and I wanted to be doing more. So I guess I, in some way, thought, well, let me go to the front of the line when the ideas are first coming in. Let me write it, and that'll give me the most kind of control over the stories that I want to be telling.
Yeah. Is there a type of screenplay that you'd like to write that you haven't yet written?
Um, yes, and I'm only hesitating because I did kind of start it many years ago, but I would love to write like a huge historical epic. And so I started writing a script about Themistocles of Athens and the Battle of Salamis, which was this huge naval battle that happened. And yeah, sort of in the vein of Gladiator, with a real historical focus, but very character driven. I actually also started writing a stage play version of that, which just happened in the tents of the Greek encampment and the tents of the Persian encampment. That also is unfinished, but so that's kind of my white whale. That screenplay is my white whale.
Awesome. Well, you never know, you might get to it.
I hope to one day. I do. I definitely will do it. It's just never been a good career move, and I do think I am a little bit afraid of it.
Well, it sounds big. It sounds like a true epic.
Yeah, I really went into it right after I graduated college. Um, I was like, I'm gonna write a screenplay. Even before I knew that I was gonna do this, I was like, well, yes, I'm gonna go pursue production down in Atlanta, but I'm also gonna work on a screenplay just because I love this and I think I'm gonna go for it. Um, and like a year of just flailing about on that. So I haven't really gone back since. I mean, I think about it a lot, and I'm sure I'm a better writer than I was then. I hope I'm a better writer than I was then, but it's still a little daunting.
Yeah. Well, I think as a tale like that would be daunting for a seasoned, screenwriter who'd done many epic Hollywood films. So, uh, you never know. That could be your opus.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Now, before we get to hear your pearls of wisdom for emerging screenwriters, we are running a competition during this episode. The winner will receive a free entry to the Script Pipeline 2021 Feature Screenwriting Contest. The first prize, as many of you know, is 25,000 US dollars, extensive industry circulation, and long-term script development. There are no mugs as part of this giveaway, so everybody calm down. I don't want to see any mug bowls going on. Although I believe Colin Lieberg did win 2 mugs last time, so he might allow me to give away one of them. No, I'm just kidding. He definitely will not. Script Pipeline are not in any way affiliated with the Lounge, and I need to say this for transparency because I am planning on entering this competition. I would like to offer another writer the chance to do the same, however. Having said that, Script Pipeline have offered to match my gift, so I now have 2 free entries to give away. So to enter, go to the YouTube comments, type in the title, genre, and logline of your project, and my producer and I will go through them right after the show and choose a winner. The winner will be announced on my Twitter page this weekend, so stay peeled. All right, or keep your eyes peeled, rather. I don't know what stay peeled means. Oh dear. Okay,
I like
advice. Advice for readers. So I'm going to ask you some general questions that things that I know you like talking about. How can a writer best set themselves up for receiving feedback from a reader?
Yeah, I think the thing when you're getting feedback, I think it's you really have to know, I think, your artistic target. I think you really want to know what you're trying to accomplish with your script, whether it's a feature or a TV pilot. But understanding the goal, and then when you hear feedback, you'll have a better sense of, does that feedback, is it accurate as far as how far or how close I am to that artistic goal? And if there's any solutions within that feedback, does it get me closer or not? But it's a little bit, if you don't have something in mind, then sometimes I think it's tough when you're getting feedback to know how to take it. It's like going on a road trip and not knowing where your final destination is, and someone says, "Oh, you know what? This didn't work for me, but I think you should do this." That might take you somewhere that's great, but not where you want to go. And so that's why I always like knowing really what I'm trying to do. And if I don't know what I'm trying to do in a script, then I won't send it out for feedback. Even if I'm kind of like, done with that draft, and maybe I just need to sit with it more and figure out what I'm doing there. So that work, I think, is really it takes a lot of introspection to really think about, why is this the story I'm telling? What is it about this? What do I want to do? Whether that story kind of has a message or not.
Yeah, I've sort of heard people say as well that the best kind of feedback says, this part isn't working for me, I don't understand this, but doesn't say how to fix it, doesn't offer suggestions on, doesn't tell you what you need to do to fix it, because that's really up to you as the writer. But what you really need feedback on is, what are you trying to do here, because it's not working, and you need to figure out how to make it work, or figure out what it is you're trying to do, or whatever. So yeah, I think that's quite important as well, when a reader's sort of not dictating exactly how you should fix the problem.
Yeah. And sometimes it's tough to suss out. Sometimes someone will say, what are you trying to do here? This isn't working. But maybe actually it is working. And that confusion that reader is feeling in that moment is about something else, or is intended. And so there are times when I'm giving feedback that I'll ask before I even say if it's working or not. Hey, I want to make sure what's going on here. Talk to me about this scene. Like, what are you trying to do? What is the purpose here? And I think you really need to have a good understanding of that before you can actually dig in and start getting the feedback to a place that is useful.
Yeah, you sound like a great person to work with. A lot better than some of my previous experiences. I'll give you a call. Yeah. I put the call out to a bunch of screenwriters to submit questions for you, and we had a pile of submissions across various platforms. So if you submitted a question, guys, and you're watching this and we don't get to your question in this time frame, apologies, please submit again. I'm going to ask you the first question that I've drawn out of the rabbit's hat is from, I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly because it's Dutch, Jan Hlobel from Amsterdam in Holland. What's the most important principle you keep in mind when you're giving feedback to writers, and what's the biggest mistake you've ever made when giving feedback?
Yeah, I think the most important principle is to really recognize that what you're reading when you're giving someone feedback, what you're reading from them is not the final form, so to speak. So you need to be aware of what's in front of you and also what it could be, because the feedback lies in that gap there. And so critiquing something isn't necessarily giving feedback. It's saying, here's what it is, and now here's why it's falling short. So really, to make a script better, keep in mind of always going towards that final form and not necessarily detracting from what is actually in front of you, if that makes sense. But I think this is why, for me, if I'm working with someone, whether it's a writer that I'm working with or just a peer that we're swapping scripts, I'm always about a conversation beforehand to really understand what it is. So, to have a sense of that final form, it's going back to, what is that artistic intent, and knowing what that is, so that, if I was taking your script, you and I would both be in agreement as to kind of what the target is. Doesn't have to be perfect, but we at least are going towards the same place before I even get in there and start to see. So that helps me kind of imagine what its final form might be. I've never said final form before in my life. It came up here, but I think I keep repeating it. But I don't know. Whatever it will be. And I guess to be very clear, that final form as a screenplay, because even that is not the story's final form. What we do is ultimately a stepping stone towards something that's seen on screen. So even the perfect final screenplay is still only partway there. But that's where we're really working with at that screenplay level.
Remade again by the director, remade again by in the edit suite. Yeah, in post-production.
Yeah. And my there was a second part, the biggest mistake, right?
Oh, biggest mistake you've ever made giving feedback.
Yeah. I think and I still make it. It's thinking, falling into the trap that my reactions and my feelings are not universal in reading something. Whenever I really forget that this is ultimately a subjective thing that we're doing, and I may feel so passionately about a note or a scene or anything, and forgetting that that's me. I think giving feedback is a constant interrogation of yourself because you're the filter through which it's coming in as well as going out, and so you have to be aware of that. I don't think anyone can give objective notes because we're not objective creatures, and so I'm fine engaging with that subjectivity as long as we're aware of it and we can talk about that openly in conversation when we're working on something together.
Yep, absolutely. I want to get into some craft questions, but first things first. College filmmakers in Austin, Texas say some of their students feel overwhelmed and fail to start. They come up with procrastination techniques like fixating on a title. And I know screenwriters who spend time designing the movie poster before they've written the movie, which is a great, very fun procrastination technique. But what advice do you have around establishing a strong writing routine to get that momentum happening? Is it important to have a routine? I'm really bad at this, by the way. I'm not good at writing for an hour a day. I tend to I have to clear my schedule for 3 days, write intensely, and then I can't write for a while, and then I have to clear my schedule again. I'm not great at writing every day, but I know that everyone says you should do it. So what's your advice for people like me?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd say the most important thing I would say is actually the fact that you know that about yourself, and then that is kind of your routine. And maybe it's not a regularly scheduled routine, but I'm not sure how you work, but I don't think you wait for inspiration to then clear your schedule. You're like, I'm gonna go write, and so I'm gonna clear my schedule. I'm gonna do it, and I think that is actually the key is to not wait for inspiration to strike to say I'm going to go write something down. And interrogating yourself and understanding how you work is part of establishing whatever your routine is. So you know that, well, this is how I do it, and I want to get some writing done, so I'm going to clear my schedule and I'm going to go write. I try to write for 2 hours every morning, and most mornings I hit it. And for me, that routine is like the train tracks. Like I don't have to think about where it's going. I just gotta show up because the tracks will dictate it, and that routine kind of provides a little bit of protection. That like when I train my body so that when I do this, whether it's show up every morning or show up when you have 3 days clear on your schedule, I'm gonna generate content. Whether that's great or not, I don't worry about it. The big thing is that I'm showing up and writing, and over time you will generate good stuff. But you have to protect that time so that you're trained to do it, essentially. I think I just used a train metaphor and I said trained as in the gym. So hopefully it's not too confusing.
No, I like it. Or you could be running next to a train track. So you're training by the train track. So it works.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just follow the tracks.
Follow all the tracks. No, that makes me feel better because, everyone's, do this every day, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, for me, it's because when I get in the zone, and once I'm in the zone, I don't want to get out. And I know that about myself. So I'm like, today is writing day and I'm doing nothing else all day because I'm in there for hours and I play music and I'm totally in that zone for that entire day, like 8 hours. And that's my day. And I don't want I turn off the internet, everything, no distractions. And that's how I write. So I know that I can't do that for an hour and then switch off and go to something else and be happy. I'll just be totally frustrated all day. So yeah, it's good. Thank you. It's okay. So work with yourself and what you know about yourself.
Think, and I think exactly what you're saying is like you dictate when you go into the zone. You don't wait for it to happen to you.
Exactly.
I think that's the big key is that you say, that's the time I'm going to put myself in the zone.
Yes.
I'm going to try to.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe it doesn't work every single time, but most of the time it does. And so you're saying, I'm coming to you. I'm not just going to wait. Okay, now I feel like I'm ready to write.
And I remember that quote, if you waited for the perfect conditions in which to write, you'd never write. Like, that's absolutely
Yeah.
true. And the world is, chaos. And, my life is chaos. It's incredibly busy. I do lots of different things. And, I would never write anything. So I have to go, this is my allotted time. And I don't know, how to get myself in that zone until I'm sitting there and I put the music on and I start. And it's about starting. It's about getting started. And there was something actually posted recently on Twitter making fun of people that give this kind of advice, and I totally get it, but it is true, right is right. You need a lot of other things as well, connections and blah blah blah, to get successful, to have success. But that's when I was at university studying writing, the very first thing they said to me was, write is right. You have to actually write. You can't just sit in cafes and talk about writing. You got to do it. You got to put pen to paper. And that's the thing. It's get started, and the rest will follow, and the rest will flow. Okay, so here we go. Some questions on structure. How important is it to outline, and should you ever start writing without an outline? What do you think?
I think probably similar to my answer on routine. I do think it's a personal question, um, and it really depends on your process. And the the big thing to think about, I think, is just make sure that your process doesn't go unexamined, so that here's why outlining works for me, here's why outlining doesn't work for me, here's why note cards work for me. And maybe you don't have to know why, but really know, like, I just don't feel good doing outlines, or like, I feel great with an outline. Yeah, I think I think generally speaking, we all do the same things in our drafts. It's at some point we're all having to look at this stuff. So for me, the question about outlining is more about, at what document do you want to use to do certain steps of your process at certain points, if that makes sense. I like to do, I don't outline, but I like to do treatments. I guess when I say I don't outline, I don't kind of do bullet points, but I'll do a perfect prose treatment of the story. And that's really, I do a lot of the story work there. I'll rewrite that over and over and over. And that's where I feel like I do a lot of discovery on the story as a whole, so that I'm not discovering those things in the draft. Now, some people like to discover those in the draft, and that's great. So knowing that about yourself, I think, is the process. So I won't say that anyone should ever start without an outline. I know that I won't start without kind of a sense of the story from a wider perspective. Maybe that's because I work mostly in features, which I think I think a feature is like a thesis argument, and maybe that's a bit of my philosophy undergrad coming out. But I don't want to start an argument without knowing where it's going to land, and so I like having that feeling of being able to see it as a whole before I go into the draft. I'm very scared to discover. It's like that road trip. I'm afraid to end up in Chicago, and like I know I want to go to New York.
Yeah. Yep, totally. I didn't used to outline at all, and now I'm a total convert. So I'm now all about the outline. So yeah, I guess it depends what works for you, for sure. I can't imagine now starting writing without a really, really, really tight idea of exactly where everything's going. Yeah. So we've got a
Yeah.
question from Denise Pappas Meechan in New York. She says she falls into the cliche that if there's something wrong in the third act, there's a problem with the first. She says, she's asking, how do you know your acts are strong in the outline phase before you start writing?
I think it's, if you can sum up an act in 1 to 2 sentences, maybe 1 to 3. So you have 3 acts, you might have at most sort of 9 sentences. If that 9 sentence story isn't captivating, then I think that's where you can see if something is wrong with one of your acts. I do that with my work. I'll try to tell it as small as possible while encompassing everything. And if that doesn't sound like, wow, that sounds like a great movie, then something is going to go wrong later. And usually you can feel it, where which of those sentences feels like it's not really connecting.
Wow.
If that makes sense. I don't know if I'm making much sense.
Yeah, that sounds great and terrifying and incredibly poignant. And like, I immediately need to run and go try to summarize my film in 9 sentences. So,
I mean, I just picked nine because I mean, maybe even one sentence for an act. But you know, if you were to take a movie, what's a movie? Everyone's seen Titanic, and you were to be like, um, Rose feels stuck in her life, and she's on this boat called the Titanic. She meets and falls in love with Jack, who leads a very different life. But then the boat starts to sink. Together, they try to escape the boat alive or something. I'm probably doing a very terrible job doing Titanic. But if that act three, if that last sentence was they get in a life raft and then go off and we see how they situate in New York, then we're like, wait a minute, that movie sounds like there was all this. They're on the Titanic. Like this is what this movie's about. So like that act three, I don't know. You might cut that from
no,
this
no,
interview. That's
no,
probably gonna
no,
make too
this
much
is
sense.
great. I totally
But
see what you're saying. So the act three is devastating because of the setup. Because of the setup. It's devastating that they don't get to be together. No, this is good. I see what you're saying. It's a good example.
well, it keeps it. It you sort of see where does this
Spoiler
movie go? It
alert, by
takes a
the way.
turn. Spoiler: the Titanic did not make it. Um, did Jack and Rose? I don't know. Just watch the film. But you can then also see like, well, what is your artistic intent? And maybe someone out there was like, actually, yeah, I want to explore the life of someone who escaped the Titanic. Then maybe your acts one and two are not what you need, and you don't have an act three problem. You have an act one or two problem because you're like, I'm actually most interested in the life of someone who made it off the Titanic and now is trying to start a new life after living this horrible tragedy. Um, then maybe don't spend as much time in Acts 1 and 2 on the ship. So it can at least start to show you, well, what is the movie I want to do? And I'm using movies because I think features are where my brain works, but really
Mm.
any story, going out to that really, really wide view, I think can help you see, but making sure that you tell that wide view in a way that you would tell a story to someone helps it. You see the flow and you'll feel where that flow like goes off.
Yeah,
And I think
yeah.
that's why I write my treatments in prose, because I can feel this scene isn't working because even on a story level, it's not there yet. And I think I used to outline, and I would never find those problems until I was in the draft when it was outlining. But by
Mhm.
writing it in as a treatment, as if I was telling it as a story, I can feel where it's kind of dipping or falling short or going off. It also creates a really great sales tool for me later. So that's I'm also doing a little bit of future work by doing that.
Yeah, so zooming out to simplify it, because ultimately all stories are about the human condition and about, someone's quest for something that they want, that they're either going to be successful or unsuccessful in, and we have to go on that journey with them and want that thing for them, and we have to be invested in it. So if we zoom out and simplify it and go, okay, why should we care about that person, and why do we care about them getting what they want? Then yeah, I think that's a really great way to break it down and see if people are going to actually care about this story and this character or these characters. I think that's great. That's a great tool. Okay, I'm gonna have to think about that later because my brain's starting to go sentences. All right. I've got a question from Norma Diana Stanton in Brooklyn. She's looking for some tips for Act Two. Now, Act Two is it's pretty big and it's pretty tough. I'm 7/8 of the way through my own feature outline at the moment. So getting through Act Two was just like it was big. She says I seem to go fast in the beginning, and then by page 62 I feel like wrapping it all up. What's the key to a strong second act? Because when you know what we know, you've done all the world building, you've set it all up at the beginning, and then you know what's going to happen, you know the end result. How do you keep things strong in the second act? What is a second act? What's a good second act about?
Um, I think I think for me, Act Two is really the place for um, thematic excursions. And so it also goes back to that idea of features a thesis argument that I think I believe so strongly. Um, and a protagonist embodies a thesis that is usually challenged, and act two is where you can really start to push on that in ways that haven't quite been pushed yet. So if you have a protagonist that believes there is nothing more important than freedom, just to take sort of a general value, um, and probably some of the bigger supporting characters are pushing other ideas. Actually, this is more important than freedom. Actually, this, and I don't mean the characters are explicitly pushing it, but that's kind of what they're representing in this film. Then I think Act Two is where you can really start to explore other more unique challenges to that idea, that core belief that protagonist has. So in this made up film about freedom, then someone, act two is where they might meet someone that says, yeah, freedom is the most important thing. In fact, I've abandoned my family, I've sold all my stuff, show what is the funhouse version of someone who does believe that. And that character may not be able to exist in the whole film, but act two is where you can kind of do a little excursion, see what that looks like. Or maybe there's someone, it doesn't always have to be a character, but there's a way to explore the idea of actually values aren't real. There are no values. Freedom is an illusion, just like every other value. And maybe what the film is really exploring is, freedom versus some level of security. Funny that these are the things that are springing to mind right now for me. But I think those act two are the places where really challenge that protagonist from the farthest reaches, because you'll eventually come back to what it's really about. Whether again in this film it's freedom versus security, but you can go on these sort of explorations in the middle of act two and let the character sort of try on some other clothes, so to speak, see how they get on with other beliefs that are different, but still not where we want them to be by the end.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm a director, and I have some camera and editing experience, and you come from an editing background. I'm curious as to whether your filmmaking experience comes into play when you're writing, because I know it very much does for me. Even to the point where if I'm writing a scene with a child in it, my directing brain flicks on and thinks, do I want to put a child actor in this situation? Like I'm way down that part of the line. And certainly my editing experience and all that kind of stuff comes into play when I'm writing. So does that affect your writing?
Yeah, a little bit, and I had to learn to kind of turn that off a bit in my early drafts, because it was taking me out of it. I was constantly thinking, what is on camera now, and that comes from working in post production, where I'd be editing a scene and I need a reaction shot right here, and writing, I go, I want a reaction shot. I know that character doesn't have a line right now, but we're going to need to check in with them. The editor's going to probably want a shot of them around here. And so I'll write it in. And now I try to do that in later drafts. I try to keep that out of my head and really be in the mindset of the characters in the moment. But it absolutely comes in. I think it's hard not to lean on, just the experiences we've had before that build us up as storytellers, and also just I think our inclination as artists. You're a director, and so you have there's part of your brain that is just always going to do that, and you can train yourself to kind of turn it off when you need to, but there is always a part of you that will want to do that. And so it's learning, I think, when to lean into it, when not to. And I realize I'm giving advice, but you didn't actually ask about advice. You asked how I do it. So I didn't mean to go into that.
No, that's fine.
About what you should do.
No, it's great.
But that, I guess that's something I've really had to learn of when is this not useful, but also when is it useful, and lean into it.
Yeah, I think sometimes it is useful. Yeah, the reaction shots, man. I find that really difficult because as I've talked to you about this before, I don't know if this is a difficult thing to discuss. But I mean, we're not supposed to write anything that can't be seen on screen. So actions, dialogue. We're not supposed to write any internal feelings or imaginings of a character. But then when you just want to convey something, someone feels something, they react to someone saying something, and you know that they're thinking or feeling something, they didn't like what was just said. But you're not, as a writer, we're told the rules are you're not supposed to put that on the page. But then I want to, he says something that she doesn't like, and I want to show that she doesn't like that, but she doesn't say anything. And it's like, well, how are you supposed to write that if you're not supposed to write, she feels, it makes her feel this, because you can't write internal feelings in it. It's a difficult one for me. Internal reactions. I don't know. How do you handle
Yeah.
that?
Um, I I think of it like in the screenplay, I'll write a reaction. It's usually terrible, and the actor will no doubt provide a better um, action than I choose, or reaction description of their, even just that small reaction of their face. But I will
Yeah,
put
so
it in
you're
the
writing it.
screenplay.
Yeah, you're writing it as a direction,
Um,
like, yeah, for what they do physically, to like show don't tell in
yeah,
that
well,
kind of
it's
way.
like, yeah, uh, David flinches, David winces,
Right.
um, uh, just as a kind of placeholder. And
Sure.
it does have to be. There's like, I have a list, that I constantly go to, and then I see how many times I've used those words. Because there's only so many words we have to describe those things. And again, like I said, the actor will find a, maybe they go, I'm not going to wince. I would do, and then they'll do whatever they do. Um, but at least putting that in the screenplay as a kind of placeholder, and it also cues the reader to see that reaction. So they're at least clocking it, and they go, oh, they winced because they didn't like that, or whatever. They'll clock the internal reaction in a
Yep.
way. And maybe that is a little bit of editing in the screenplay, making sure that I'm basically trying to insert my reaction shot at that point.
Yeah.
I think it's most important if it causes a turn, especially a turn of tactics for the actor speaking. So if you and I were characters in a scene, um, and I say something and it makes zero sense, and so you kind of have a quizzical reaction. Even if you don't have a line, I see your reaction, and so I then go, well, I mean, I guess what I should have said is blah blah blah. I see your reaction, so that caused a turn of tactics for me. I'm gonna try this for another approach. That I think is really important to put in the screenplay. Just your whatever your reaction might be. I would definitely put a placeholder in there, because then that is actually the action that gave my character something to then turn on.
Yeah, to bounce off. It's sort of related to a question that Colin with two L's Lieberg submitted from DC, which he was asking about what are some really good underused actions that can help bring out character, and some overused tropes that you see too often.
It's tough for me to think of sort of specific actions, but I'd say actions that are universal, that I have a actions that I go, I've done that. Um, that's I don't know if I'd say they're underused, but I think to me those are the things that really bring out character, because I can recognize the situation, or at least the dynamics of the situation, and then see how they react to it. I've had either firsthand experience, or I've witnessed it. And I think the trick with tropes, asking about overused tropes, is, for me, what gets overused are usually the cosmetic level of the tropes. I think tropes are really great because they're obviously very satisfying story beats and story elements. And so understanding what is satisfying about that, I think, is the key. And then making sure you just don't retread whatever the specifics of that is. So, if I'm at the coffee shop and someone, the barista calls my name, and someone comes up and takes my cup of coffee, uh, how I react to that it will tell you something about myself. And if I was a character in this scene. And I think we can all, even if we haven't been in that exact situation, I think we all know the feeling of, you know, having to sort of confront a complete stranger just to let them know, like, hey, I think you made a mistake. And maybe I don't. Maybe I just order another cup because like I'm very nervous, or maybe I yell at the guy because it's a guy that took it in this scenario. But that might be, if I were to put that in a film, that might feel a little bit tropey. But if we're in a Western and a guy comes out of a saloon, a cowboy, and he's, a bottle deep in whiskey and unties my horse and is about to ride out of town with my horse. Now that, sort of same scenario, but like that might feel fresh in a Western because the specifics are different.
Mhm.
So I don't know. Hopefully that answers Colin's question.
Yeah.
But I think it's universal situations that are then so specific that they've almost never happened before. I think that's the trick to showing something that I can recognize while making it feel not like I've seen it before.
Yeah, and like you said, how your specific character would react in that situation is incredibly different to how a different character is going to react in that situation, and therefore it doesn't feel like, even if the actual situation is an overused trope, it doesn't matter because it's all about the reaction.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, cool. We've got a question, another one from Washington DC, Karen Franz, and she's asking, "What are the top 5 signs of a green writer?"
I'm no authority on the top five, but I can say five. I think that I see often, and I think the first one, rushing through moments. Something feels like it should be dramatic, it should be big, and it just kind of goes by almost too fast on the page. So giving the characters that space to react is important when something is big, giving something the weight it demands. Not writing visually is a big one. I mean, sort of forgetting that this is a visual medium. So putting things in the script that cue my imagination to see and hear things, I should say as well. But just forgetting that, and it kind of reads almost sometimes like a stage play, which is it very sparse, for that thing. But I think screenwriting is important to remember. You're writing for the screen, so make sure to write visually. Not a strong not having a strong viewpoint or perspective, I think, is another one. And I don't mean sort of an artistic perspective, but really thinking in this scene, who do I kind of see the action through? Whose character do we enter and exit scenes with, if we're kind of entering or exiting? And if it is a more objective viewpoint, then making sure it is objective. Um, I talk a lot of the audience getting to see characters behind the mask is a metaphor I use a lot. Like when the audience gets to see, okay, who do we get to see behind the mask? Because that's usually whose perspective we end up getting. And if we see everyone's, it kind of feels like a wash. If we see no one's, then that's a very broad objective view. But if you're in a scene with someone, if you're in a scene, there are two characters in a scene, usually one of those we're gonna get peeks behind the mask. And if we're not, it's because that author is kind of taking a viewpoint. And that is very specifically the thing. So I guess I should say it's more, those are all options, but it's more about making sure you're intentional with that. Scripts that I read from writers who have been writing a bit longer are very clear with kind of who we get to see and who we only get to observe behavior from a broader point of view. Characters saying how they think and feel is a big one, which is not always bad, but just every line is exactly what it just reveals the character's internal state through their dialogue. We rarely, people rarely ever talk like that, and so making sure that the characters reflect, reality, I guess, in a way. That's 4 if I'm counting.
Yep.
The last one is I'd say not thinking about why they're writing this story. And to expand on that, I guess like maybe why they write, because that larger question usually provides insight into the specific question about that script. But not knowing what it is about yourself that leads you to write this story, I think is the sign of can be a sign of a greener writer. And I think the answer to why we write, I mean, is an endless question. And if that answer, if someone asks you that and you give an answer and that answer doesn't feel vulnerable, I'd say I don't think you have an answer yet. I think that's what I'd say.
Yeah.
I know when when people used to ask me why I write, I'd say, well, I really like telling stories, and I'm very interested in sort of nostalgia and nostalgia for childhood. And my answer for why I wrote used to be, well, I think I'm trying to recapture some of that. And when I first started giving that answer, it felt a little vulnerable. It almost doesn't feel that way anymore. And I think it's because there's probably a reason under that. Okay, well, David, why are you writing that? And I think the answer is closer to, well, I think I'm longing for childhood, and there's a fear that I won't be as happy as I was as a child. I think that's a fear I live with, and that informs a lot of my writing. And that provides more insight into any story I'm in.
Wow.
But I don't know if I would have gotten to that point if I hadn't really sat with the first part. And I think even now, I'm sure there's a deeper level. Like, well, why, David, why is that scary to you? Why is that a fear? And it's like, well, maybe I'm afraid of the future, my future being bleak compared to how wonderful it was as a kid. I feel like I had a very great childhood. Yeah, and I feel like that's starting to feel, now I'm starting to feel a little bit vulnerable, and that's kind of where I think the real juice is as far as why I write. And I think those are the questions that every writer should be asking themselves. Not every single day. Introspection is tough and sometimes exhausting, but it's good stuff to know about why you're in, why you're writing a certain scene or a certain moment the way you are, or certain characters, so you're ready to really answer the questions, hey, when you're in feedback, hey, so this character, why are they so upset when this happened? Oh, and I think a greener writer will say, well, of course, because that's how people are. It's like, I know a bunch of people that maybe wouldn't get upset there. What is it that you're really digging into here? And that's usually something about yourself.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I didn't mean to step on you there.
No. That's I'm yeah. Mine sort of goes back to childhood as well, but kind of the opposite of yours. I write write about trauma recovery, so it's the opposite of the happy childhood story. But but for me, the juicy writing comes through actually having the courage to write from that place and actually examine trauma recovery and survival. So yeah, that's what I'm writing now. So it's pretty tough and definitely vulnerable, but it's actually powerful and quite rewarding because I get to control the narrative in places where I couldn't before. So, but yeah, it's big sometimes. Okay.
Yeah.
We've got a question from Peter Furstfonse from New York. He wants to know if it's possible to please both a script reader and a producer, because the reader seems to look for McKee or Save the Cat structure, while a producer is looking for story, character, and, let's face it, commercial viability. So a few people were talking about this as well, in relation to sometimes even formatting or whatever. But and I know that every reader's different, every producer's different, but are you going to get different, producers and script readers are going to read a script very differently? Can you send the same script out to a producer and to a script reader, or a bunch of them, and please both parties ever, I suppose, is the question. It's a very broad question, but yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think yeah, no, I mean, I think absolutely you can. And the reason I feel confident about that answer is because I think it's happened. Yeah, and there are scripts out there with it please readers and producers, and yeah, I mean they are looking for different stuff. I can't speak for every reader and producer, and I don't know if every reader is necessarily looking for um, McKee or Save the Cat structure. And everyone reads a script for very different reasons. I think they're a lot more varied than we maybe give all of readers, not, and I don't mean sort of professional readers, but just anyone that reads a script. I think what people are looking for is as myriad as there are the readers that are there, and it's possible. It's tough because we're all so subjective, but yeah, I mean, I guess that's not a very helpful answer, but I do think it's possible.
Yeah, there's lots of examples there. Um,
Hmm.
so, so a general question that came in, I guess, from a few quarters was, how do you know when your screenplay's finished and ready to send to a producer?
Um, I'll repeat the advice that I was given when I continued to ask this question, which was when your friends when your friends ask you if they can send it along to people, kind of let the world decide when it's ready. Don't be shy about sending your stuff out to friends and peers, and when everyone coming back is saying this is great, I think it's can I send this to so and so, or you should get this out there, what are your plans for it, when they start talking in sort of future tense about the project, that's when you'll start to feel like it's ready.
Yep.
um, that's when I feel like it's ready. And so if I didn't have that feedback, I don't know how I would know. I think I would always feel like it's never ready. And I think letting the other
Yeah.
people, in a way, letting the world kind of tell you, is a really great way to just kind of relinquish control, because otherwise I would continue to try and make it better.
Yeah, yeah, because you could tweak forever, couldn't you? And you, at some
Hmm.
point, you have to let it go and say, all right, well, you know, that's okay to be made now. And anyway, as we've discussed before, it's going to go through a series of processes and it's going to come out and it's going to be a different movie if it gets made. So, but it's time for me now to let it go out into the world and become its own thing.
Yeah,
And then I've got to
and
move on.
especially yeah, no, I
Yeah.
think moving on is key. There's uh, if you're getting feedback and it if you're only changing things based on the feedback because that's what someone said, and you don't feel like it's taken you closer to that intention you have with it, then it may be a place where it's as far as it will go with where you are as a writer right now, and it's ready to be kind of out there. If I call it rearranging furniture. When I feel like I'm just rearranging furniture, I know, like, okay, look, it may not be perfect. Is any screenplay ever truly perfect? I don't know, but it may not be there. But a producer can make the call based on this. I think that's the big thing, is asking if this is a if this is a great example of my writing, and they can make a call on whether or not that's a project that they're interested in
Mm.
or not. Um, and I think that in my experience, producers, managers, other readers are small things that aren't perfect. They're relatively forgiving when it comes to, like, this is good or this is not. It's not those little things when you're that close to the finish line. Those little things don't seem to matter as much. And so if you're continuing to rearrange these little things just to try and get over that finish line, it's not those little things that's holding the script back. It's on a bigger level, and let it go. That one didn't fly, and on to the next one. I think letting it go is huge.
Mm. Yeah, and some of those tweaks can happen between the director and the actors in rehearsal or on set. There'll be, or and the studio might even, if they keep you engaged and brilliant, but oftentimes enough, they'll call in some other writer to make tweaks on set anyway. And so it's yeah, like you're saying, all of those little tweaks or whatever, none of those are really important. It's the bigger, is the project viable, and is it something I'm interested in? And they'll know that.
Mm.
Yeah, like you're saying, it's never going to be perfect. So that's very good advice. Tim Westland in SoCal, Southern California, biggest mistakes made with log lines.
Um, yeah, I think two. I think there are sort of two that I see. I'm sure there are others, or at least other people would have different opinions. But the two that I see would be the logline is just a little bit too coy about what it's about. It kind of doesn't give me everything. Um, and so if your logline is sort of ends with faces a challenge unlike she's ever seen before, it's like, well, which is what, like, I want to know, like, that's so don't be too coy about what it is. Really looking for specificity is important. And I think the second mistake is that the logline isn't exciting enough. And I don't mean that the idea isn't exciting, but the logline itself kind of captures the information of the story completely, but almost doesn't capture the spirit of what it is. So making sure that your logline is really in the tone and spirit of your project
Mm-hmm.
would be the second one.
Yeah, okay. Um, so, yeah, and maybe kind of suiting the genre. Is that what you mean as well, like with the tone? Because you
Yeah,
see a comedy
yeah,
logline would be very different to a sci-fi logline or a dramatic logline.
yeah, exactly. And you have to say in your logline, if a sci-fi or a comedy, your logline, I should be able to see from the way it's constructed of, oh, okay, this is a comedy, or oh, this feels maybe pretty heady, or oh, this is just a very bare bones drama. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think of laws. There's that one. I've seen it around, but someone sort of wrote a logline for Wizard of Oz where it's like um, a young woman from Kansas goes to a distant land, kills the first person she meets, and then teams up with three strangers to kill again. Which is like not exactly a logline for Wizard of Oz, but maybe it could be. But like that is, that feels like a very different film than Wizard of Oz. And so that would be an example where it doesn't quite capture the spirit of it, and they do it in that's obviously a joke, but I think it's a good example of where your logline, they can lead you astray if they maybe sound like something that your story isn't.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so matching the tone. We've got a question from Nicole in Sydney, Australia. She's asking about how you can best leverage being a competition finalist. So you've finished the script, you've submitted it, you're a finalist in a big contest outside whatever the competition itself provides. So you know how winners tend to receive introductions and meetings and things, aside from maybe sometimes a bit of money. But how can finalists or even semi-finalists leverage their placement in order to further their careers?
Um, yeah, I think those intros and meetings that winners get as opposed to finalists is uh, there is a big gap between getting that and then you're a finalist and now you have this nice sort of piece of cred, but it still doesn't necessarily open a door for you. But I think it does really help when you knock. So there still is a little bit of work to be done to find out which doors to knock on. But when you do knock, I think like really leaning into piece of that piece of information about the whatever the placement was. And for me, that always felt weird. To sort of it very much feels like tooting your own horn, which I think a lot of people a bit squeamish about. And I wouldn't push anyone to just ignore that squeamishness. But for me, what helped was to kind of really load up all of those accolades, if you got them, onto the script, and so it's less about yourself. And like it's almost like you're a broker for this wonderful piece of material you have. And so instead of saying, "Hi, I'm David Wappel. I got a fellowship to such and such," I say things like, "Hi, I'm David Wappel. I have a thriller titled Knife Crazy, but this was a finalist at Austin Film Fest." Maybe that wouldn't be great, but putting it on the script, I think, helped me feel more comfortable with talking about some early sort of wins I had in my career. That was a mental shift for me that allowed me to talk about it in places that I wouldn't have otherwise. And some of those led to they didn't lead to things happening, but they led to relationships, which will eventually at some point lead to great things. And if not, I have those good relationships, so that's always good. But yeah, I don't know, does that answer the question at all? I'm not really sure.
Do you think as a finalist, someone could reach out to maybe some of the competition judges afterwards and email them and just say, "Hey, I just wanted to like touch base, and I was a finalist in this contest that you judged, and I wonder if I could I don't know." I have no idea what you'd say. "Hey, wanna grab some coffee sometime?" I don't know. But like, do you think that you could reach out to some of the judges perhaps?
Possibly. I haven't thought about it. I haven't explored that myself. But I won't disparage it without looking into it. I'd say, yeah, if you're thoughtful and look into it and you feel like that is something that would be okay to do.
I was going to say, you can maybe say, if you won with a short screenplay, I wonder if I could send you my feature. Maybe you could do something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I will say something that really helped me was early on when I was meeting a lot of people. I made a rule to not ask for reads. And it's a hard and fast rule. I don't recommend anyone. I think hard and fast rules are not great in general. And because there obviously are times where I think you see it and you really have to ask for what you want. So I'm not saying don't ask for what you want. But for me, I didn't know how to kind of turn that corner of reaching out to someone and getting them to read my script. And I told myself, you know what, for the next 6 months, I'm just not going to ask for reads. I'm going to try to build relationships, and like that's it. And I'm going to just try to connect with this person on a level as if they can't actually do anything for me. So again, I'm not saying everyone should do that, but it helped me talk to people in a way that I didn't feel like I always felt like I was angling for something. I hated that feeling, but there were reasons I was trying to connect with people. And so once I stopped, I just said, all right, well, if it feels weird to you, it probably feels weird to them. Just stop angling and just see what happens. And that's great. I have a lot of my strongest relationships now are ones that I sort of formed during that time. And then I let the rule go and I said, okay, well, now when I feel more comfortable with a person, I can kind of feel like it's a time to ask for that read or ask for an introduction to someone or something like that. But if you're reaching out to someone, whether it's a judge from a competition that you were a finalist at or someone else, don't rush right into, hey, here's the thing that I'm going to ask you. I even just reaching out and saying, hey, I appreciate you reading my script and that it resonated with you. And if you know some of their work, you could mention that, and you just look for it's a way to build a relationship, because now you have this thing in common. You know, you wrote the script, they read the script, and they obviously liked it enough to put it in the finals, and that's enough to start a relationship on. And you don't have to try to do too much yet. But yeah, that might be a way to leverage your finalist placement without some of those explicit, you know, meetings set up with so and so, or, you know, intros to these people.
Yeah, my best professional relationships have actually been formed by just chatting with people and just like you said, relationship building and not asking for anything. And then I found
Mm-hmm.
that after I just, you know, keep my head down and work hard and people see that, and then after a while people start offering things, which is nice. But yeah, it is important to just
Yeah.
to just build relationships for sure. And because you want, and genuinely, not because you want to get something from that person later on, but because you want to have good people in your corner as you move through this process, and as you move through this industry. You want to have a team of people around you who are good people that you either want to work with someday, or just that you want to be able to, you know, chat with or call on and say, hey, what do you think of this? Or, you know, what would you do in that situation? Or did you like this? Or I don't know, just sort of chat to about certain things. It's just really good to build a good network of people around you, you know, that you can just talk to, I think, because it's such a tough industry. So I think really that's really the most important thing. I think that's what I found anyway.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. And honestly, I most of those people, when I stopped asking for reads, they still offered to read if they could. I think people, when they genuinely connect with someone, they genuinely want to help. And so the reads that you may get from it, and I'm saying reads, but it could be reads or, you know, intros to other people that would be interested in your work. Um, they are more they're more genuine because they came from the other person, and it's not someone who's kind of navigating that situation of like, I'll say yes because I'd rather say yes and, you know, spend an hour and a half reading their script than just going through the awkwardness of having to say no.
Mm.
And that's always a really bad place to be, for your script to be. You don't want your script to be read by someone who wishes they had said no when you asked. So by
Yeah.
sometimes by not asking, and they go, yeah, well, what else do you have? Oh, you know, I have this other sci-fi. Like, oh, that sounds great. Can I read it? And it's like, yeah. Now they're asking for it, and you're not asking for it. And most people I've found, if they have the time and the bandwidth to read, they will, if they really like you as a writer.
Yeah, and I think it's great to pay it forward as well. You know, offer to read other people's work and elevate people and, you know, boost people. And you know, if you're writing features, then offer to read some people's work who are writing shorts and boost them, and you know, give them some notes and some feedback. And you know, a rising tide lifts all ships. And you know, I really believe that you know we can all sort of support each other, and I think that's really important. So, you know, be a part of that, I think. Be a part of that process and that vibe. And I think, you know, that will help you more as well, I think. You know,
Yeah,
help you
absolutely.
feel good as well. Okay, well we are so running out of time. So I'm gonna ask you one more question from and I'm so sorry I didn't get to everyone's questions, but thank you so much for all of your answers, David. And I did not want to cut you off from any of them. It's just been so great having all of your responses. And I hope, guys, that you've benefited from it. I know I have. I'm going to watch this again and go take a bunch of notes myself. So I've just got a fun question from Guy Crawford in New Orleans or Norlands. Um, I love the term used by some of your clients that their scripts have been wappled or wappelized. Do you?
Uh, I'm a bit torn on this one, because on the one hand, I mean, yeah, it's fun to hear my name, and the name recognition is obviously good for me for finding other, you know, writers to work with. But I don't know. To be honest, I do get a bit squeamish about it sometimes, and I think it's because I, you know, I'll see it, and I'll have a reaction to it, like, oh, that's good, that feels good. Is that just am I just enjoying a bit of an ego stroke there? Sometimes I feel that way, and I think it also feels like I'm hesitant for it to be, or for it to look like I'm taking all of the credit for something that the writer and I did together. I don't want it to ever seem like I have some magic wand to do anything to your script, or that I even provide very explicit answers on what's wrong. I think if I'm good at anything, it's that I'm good at asking questions, and those questions will hopefully raise a writer's awareness of choices they're making in the script, both consciously and unconsciously, or subconsciously. And I think it's the fact that together, when I say together, me and the writer, we both put those choices under the microscope, and that helps them hopefully find things in their story that were just kind of either hiding or just out of reach. And yeah, I don't know. It's a very long answer to say that I sometimes feel weird about it, because it gets my name out there, but am I just enjoying that as a bit of an ego stroke? And I don't know, I'm sure I'm overthinking it, but I guess the answer would be it kind of depends on my mood, maybe.
Well, you're
I
very
like it or not.
humble. You're very humble about it, and you don't want to be seen to be taking the credit for all of the hard work that the writer has done and the work that you've done together. So I guess you won't be changing your Twitter handle to the Wappelizer anytime soon, which is
No,
fine.
I will not.
All right, well, I can't see the chat, but hopefully you guys have been posting your titles, genres, and loglines in the comments below. You have just a few minutes to get them in, so to win a free entry to the Script Pipeline 2021 Feature Screenwriting Contest. So do that now. I want to give a huge thank you to my guest this evening, David Wappel. Thank you so much for joining me on the lounge.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me. This was so much fun.
The Lounge is brought to you by Sky Woman Productions in Australia, produced by Travis Currie at Currie Media in Canada. Subscribe on YouTube, Twitch, or wherever you find your podcasts, and watch us live via the Aminah Hughes pages on Facebook or Twitter. I would like to extend a big thank you to my very special guests and to all of you beautiful people for watching or listening. Thank you for joining me on The Lounge.